Hey everybody, how you doing? This is about to be a really fun video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 223 versus 300 Blackout, a bunch of different factory loadings, but at the end of this video, you're going to have a good understanding of drop between 223 and 300 Blackout, also the energy at a bunch of different distances, and also something that I started adding on to these videos is the dial in mils. Partially for my own knowledge, I already did all this work up. I might as well document the dial, and then also so that you have that information. By the way, I woke up this morning with pink eye, if you didn't already see that. Anyways, 223, 300 Blackout, there's all different types of applications. There's hunting, there's self-defense, there's out at the range, target plinking. You can take both of these out to 1,000 yards if you want to, and beyond. So again, we're going to talk about drop, energy, and dial for your optics. Me personally, some people like red dots. I don't really like red dots. I'd rather have something with some zoomies on it. This right here is one of my 300 Blackouts, and I got some zoomies on it. And I have an optic that can be dialed in mils, so we could take this out to 1,000 yards, if so we please. Why not have the best of both worlds? Get a LPVO like this with illumination, and essentially it is a red dot. It's just my opinion. Also, here's another one. When we talk about flinging these, this one is in 5.56 or 2.23. Same thing. This one I've got 10 zoomies on it. Can dial it, and I've got 45-degree pop-up. So that's a comment. A lot of people say, "Oh man, what if your scope goes bad?" Well, slim chance of that happening, but if it does, well then we got the 45s on there, okay? You know, that's a comment that people say all the time. Normally it's the old fuds that say that. Well, your optic's just gonna break. I don't recall ever having an optic break, but then again, I'm not sitting here in a battle every day either. So give you another look, taking them out of the mag. So up at a glance, you might not recognize a difference, but 300 Blackout, 223. A lot bigger blue light. These are actually 220 grain subsonics in the 300 Blackout that's loaded up, and these are 55 grain FMJs in 223. Give you another look out of the clipazine there. You can see a considerable difference there when we hold them up like this. The loaded projectile is a big difference. 220 grain in the 300 Blackout and a 55 grain. That's what I've got loaded up in these two particular magazines right here. If somebody shows up and wants to party, basically. Being honest, I actually had a dream about that last night, and for some reason I couldn't find any magazines in my dream. So when I woke up, I make sure, yeah, we do have magazines ready. Anyways, that's a lot of talking. Now let's get into the data. Remember, I said drop, energy, and dial in mils for your optic. So here we go. I'm going to pop up the pictures here, and you guys can pause and freeze and look at whatever you want to. 5 factory loadings for 223, 5 factory loadings for 300 Blackout. It is no surprise. I'm a Remington ammunition man, so a lot of these, most of them, all of them but one, are Remington factory loaded cartridges. So let's just jump into it. So when we talk about drop, this first one we're looking at is drop in inches. So green means good. Green means it drops less at that given distance. Yellow means in the middle. Red means that drops the worst, or the most rather, at that given distance. So for 223, if you sight it in at 100 yards, everything here is sighted in at 100 yards. You sight it in at 100 yards, pretty much regardless, it's going to drop 3 inches. So we've got everything in 223 here on this chart, from a 50 grain AccuTip V to a 62 grain Core-Lokt, 62 grain Ultimate Defense, a 55 grain UMC, which is the more affordable target stuff, and then a 69 grain target round. Some of these are going to drop more, some of these are going to drop less. So if you look at the 223s, 3-inch drop at 200 yards, at 300 yards, it's roughly a foot. So if regardless of, that's not 223, regardless of the dials, this is information every American ought to know. You got it sighted in at 100 yards, 3-inch holdover at 200, a foot holdover at 300. After that, I mean, really, if you want to be doing precision stuff, you're going to dial it. But if you're not, for whatever you need it for, 200 yards, 3-inch holdover with 223. 300 yards, it's a foot holdover. That's something every single one of y'all can remember. Man, my eye looks bad. But now let's compare that to 300 Blackout. So you might want speed, you might want energy, you might want quiet, which is kind of where 300 Blackout shines. But looking at this chart specifically, that same data point for 300 Blackout, well, for supersonic loadings, it's kind of varying. At 200 yards for 300 Blackout, you can see it's dropping 7 inches to almost 11 inches for the supersonics, but the subsonics, look at that difference there. That's that big red one. That's what I got loaded up right here. It's the subsonic, 220 grain subsonic, 940 feet per second. It's dropping over 3 feet between 100 yards and 200 yards. So if you've never used subsonic stuff, you might not know that. Now you know. How come I'm not hitting the target, man? It's because that thing is slow and it's dropping pretty quick. But you guys can freeze this. 223 is flatter than 300 Blackout, generally speaking. So something to consider. Now, let's look at, well, I always forget about this. Pop up the pretty picture right here, and this, you can freeze this and look at everything. Some people want to see a picture. All right, now let's talk about energy. So, energy, if your goal is saying, man, well, actually, let's back it up and talk about drop. One more thing real quick. So, the least amount of drop on all these 223s versus 300 Blackouts is that 69 grain Remington Premier match. That's good stuff. I believe I have a video or two on that stuff. It's grouped well for me in the past. It's got a good BC for a 223. 223, you're not working with much real estate, and it's hard to get the BC up there. But that one has a pretty good BC, 69 grain .336. It has the least amount of drop of everything on here. People do 223 to 1,000 yards and beyond all the time. It's not the best for doing that, but it'll do it. Next, let's go on to energy. So if your goal is, man, I want the most energy, well, this is where it kind of flips. When we talked about drop, the 223 drops less than the 300 Blackout. Well, almost every 300 Blackout has more energy than 223. So if energy is your goal, maybe you want to consider 300 Blackout. So, looking at this chart, what has the most energy at the muzzle? Well, believe it or not, it's a 223. It's that 69 grain Premier match from Remington 223, which I just said has the least drop out of all 10 of these loadings. It also has the highest muzzle energy, 3,000 feet per second with the 69 grainer. That's a heavy 223, and it's still booking it pretty good. But then you can see, once we get to 100 yards, and that 69 grainer carries good energy out there pretty far. It's the number one most energy at every given distance, looks like, until 600 yards. So, but then we get into the energy discussion here. You can see at further ranges, there's a bunch of red with the 223, and then the 300 Blackout at the bottom of the chart is all green. Now, 300 Blackout has the most energy, 200 yards, and then kind of, it's green, but it's not necessarily green by a ton. So, yeah, look at this chart, freeze it, all the same loadings in here, core locked, AccuTips, Premier match. I tried to put in defense stuff, target stuff and 1 or 2 hunting loadings from the factory. So regardless of your perspective, if you're wanting this information for hunting, self-defense, out at the range, there's something in here you can latch onto. And if one of these Remington loadings isn't your favorite, there's probably one that's very similar in weight and ballistic coefficient and speed that you could kind of key off on. But yeah, there's the energy discussion. At the muzzle, 223 has a lot of speed and energy, but past the muzzle, 300 Blackout kind of takes over. Now, one thing real quick to key in on, the subsonic round, that 220 grain Remington subsonic. High BC, because that is a big boo lot in there, which helps to get that high BC. Low energy. At the muzzle, 432 foot-pounds of energy. So when people ask me about hunting with subsonics, I will pretty much never recommend you hunt with subsonic for that reason. You don't have the speed, you don't have the energy. There's people making boo lots that's, you know, configured to expand well at low speeds and all that stuff, but fact of the matter is, and the math shows, you still don't have that energy. Energy's what you're going to drop them with. Just saying. We've taken a lot of deer. I've tried taking deer with subsonic stuff. It's not ideal, guys. I'm telling you. I will never recommend that you hunt with a subsonic round. But I'm not telling you what to do either. America, do what you want to do. Just telling you from my experience. But there are times where it's nice to have subsonic, you know, if you need to be incognito, so on and so forth. I have those subsonics loaded up in this thing. Yeah, this thing. Got a can on there. Whew, super quiet. If being quiet is your goal, that's the one you need to grab onto. 220 grain Remington subsonic. Can't even hear it. I got videos on it. It's super quiet. Anyways, we talked about dropping inches. 223 is flatter than 300 Blackout. We talked about energy. To an extent, the majority of the 300 Blackout carries energy a lot further. Now let's talk about scope dial. So I'm not going to talk about this too much. If you've never done it or done anything long range, a lot of people are deer hunting at 200 yards and in, and they're just, you know, it's dead on here, and I'm still going to hold on the animal, but slightly higher, and that's good enough for me. Well, if you're going out past 200 yards, it's much more precise, and you need to know how to dial. You know, 300 yards, what were some of those? Go up to the top. 300 yards, you're holding a foot over, but 400, you're holding 31 inches or 28 inches or, you know, 77 inches with 300 Blackout. You don't need to be holding 77 inches over like, oh, let's hold 5 foot over that deer. Nah, you don't need to be guessing, especially when you're hunting. And if it's a situation that would save your life, hey, it'd be good to know the dials and know how to do that stuff. But for these, something like I said, this is in mils, MRAD. So just to kind of walk you through it, this is 300 Blackout. If I was trying to hit a piece of steel at 400 yards and I had those 220 grainers in here, it's bright red because it's dropping the most because it's the subsonic, but I need to dial this for 17.5 mils. So you look on here and click it over to 17.5. I have a video on that. It's called something like Long Range for Beginners or Long Range for Dummies or something. But here's all the dials. 223 versus 300 Blackout. This is in mils. If I ever have the choice, I always pick mils over MOA. You know, you can do this in MOA if you want. Some people like MOA. I like mils. But this is the dials. So it's the same chart. We did drop in inches. This is drop in mils. So 223 drops less. You can see the green compared to 300 Blackout. But hey, let me know in the comments What do you guys think? Are you team 223 or are you team 300 Blackout? I like them both. But hey, appreciate you watching. This was more of a nerdy video, but I think it's information that a lot of people haven't been taught. And like I said, I have a video that teaches you how to do this. It's very simple. Very, very simple. I could teach you in 30 seconds on how to get this information yourself based on your specific loading. You know, I'm looking here for stuff to grab. Regardless of what your loading is, it's 7 PRC, you know, 300 Win Mag. You can do the same stuff with just a couple data points. But let me know what your favorite is, 223, 300 Blackout, and why in the comments down below. Make sure you guys have subscribed to the WHOTEEWHO channel. Make sure you've gone and subscribed to WHOTEEWHO.com newsletter. It's a free newsletter. Appreciate y'all watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. WHOTEEWHO!